Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the International Relations Conference on India and Development Partnerships in Asia and Africa towards a new paradigm. We are indeed honored to have a galaxy of eminent speakers amongst all of us across all tracks. Track 1 talks about development partnerships, a thematic overview. The chair for Track 1 is Ambassador Ronen Sen. Ambassador Ronen Sen, a Padma Bhushan awardee, was Joint Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs and Joint Secretary to the Prime Minister of India. He was the only person after Vijay Lakshmi Pandit to have served as India's ambassador to Russia, Britain and USA. He is on the advisory board of the Symbiosis Institute of International Studies. The speakers for this track are His Excellency Mr. Leonpo Rinzin Dorje, Foreign Minister of Bhutan, Ambassador Shyam Saran, Chairman, Research and Information Systems for Developing Countries, and Mr. Abhay Thakur, Joint Secretary, Northern Division, Nepal, Bhutan. I kindly request Ambassador Ronen Sen to kindly take over this session. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Dr. Majumdar and distinguished and your colleagues at Symbiosis, it's a great pleasure for me to chair the first session. In a sense, the inaugural session set the tone, the broad overall theme of this conference, and I think this was captured very well just in the opening remarks which were made by Dr. Majumdar. And I'm glad that he spoke from the heart of what this university means, and he spoke up front about the problems faced by foreign students in India and what symbiosis means. Because sometimes we tend to be in a state of denial, or the fact that in our country, which we found our freedom under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi, who in turn owed so much to South Africa, and the making of Mahatma Gandhi was actually, his experiences in South Africa and the apartheid regime there. And it's curious that in the land of Gandhi, and it's quite unnerving for a number of our foreign students to face the type of discrimination they face, and I'm glad that Dr. Majumdar addressed this right up front. And the university making itself, as he said, a home away from home. And it's not only the university with students from, as we saw, this beautiful ceremony with their flags from 85 countries, representing what this university means, but it's within India also. This university has fostered not only international relations, but within India also we have discrimination from parts of India and from the northeast elsewhere. And so the symbolism of this event in the inaugural function is very, very important to remember. And what I do is I will not make my opening remarks as such, but I would like to make not to come in the way of you and the distinguished speakers on the panel today. So after you've heard the speakers, I will make some overall comments. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce the first speaker to you. We have the distinguished Foreign Minister of our immediate neighbor, Bhutan, Mr. Limpo Rinzin Dorje, who's with us. And thank you. He is, he has did his Bachelor of Arts degree, and then followed it up with a master's degree in public policy, with a specialization in decentralization and democratization from the Institute of Social Studies at The Hague. And he served thereafter as assistant planning officer, then planning officer, and thereafter in many positions, but principally as the Zonda, which is like a regional governor, chief minister cum regional governor, before he decided to enter politics. And after joining politics, he was soon elevated and chosen by His Majesty the King and the Prime Minister to as foreign minister of his country. And we have very special and close relations with Bhutan, and it's emblematic. It's emblematic of what a true partnership should be. It's not a relationship between donor and recipient, but a true partnership. And I'm sure that we will all benefit from listening to him. So without further ado, may I request the Honourable Minister to take the podium? Thank you.
I'm, in fact, at a loss of words. Indeed, when I was in college, I used to be a backbencher. To save myself from all the probing minds, probing eyes, in fact, the common sense, the lack of which I was in great fear, the great escape it. I had no place but to be at the back of the benches, at the back of everybody else. But by function, by position, I had no choice but to be in the forefront and to be speaking my own minds, the minds of the people of Bhutan. Thank you for the golden opportunity so provided to a humble person, Ranjan Dorji, Foreign Minister of Bhutan. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, my dear students, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, a very, very good afternoon. I'd like to thank His Excellency Ambassador Robinson, who kindly took the trouble of getting into my history, a very humble history though. And thank you once again, Your Excellency Rani. And I thank Your Excellency Majumdar and your family, whom with great sense of pride, great sense of duty, have been able to be at this position, at this juncture. I congratulate Dr. Majumdar, family and faculty of Symbiosis University. I congratulate you once again. It is always a great pleasure to be visiting India, and since this is my first visit to Pune or Pune, the beautiful and vibrant cultural capital, perhaps what I heard, the Oxford of the East of Maharashtra. Please allow me to express my gratitude for the warm reception and hospitality accorded to me and my delegation. I've been looking forward to visit Symbiosis University And it is indeed an honor for me to be here in the company of so many distinguished people. Visits such as the visit to the academic institutions always inspire me, for it has been said that great minds are nursed in the great halls of learning. That being said, it would be remiss for me not to recognize the important role that the faculty and staff play in molding and preparing the students and future leaders for the responsibilities and challenges that lie ahead. To their dedication and commitment to the pursuit of excellence, I express my admiration. We have some students from Bhutan studying at Symbiosis University, and I hope that they have proven to be our good ambassadors in strengthening people-to-people relations between our countries. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my dear students, the topic of today's discussion is India's development partnership with Bhutan. And while it would not be possible for me to talk about the entire gamut of our relations within the allotted time, I'll, however, try and focus my talk this afternoon on the uniqueness and important facet of our development partnership. If you look at the depth and breadth of Indo-Bhutan relations, we will begin to appreciate how unique it is. This relationship is no artificial political construct. In fact, it is a relationship that draws strength from the rich tapestry of our shared historical, geographical, and cultural heritage. It would be rare in the annals of international relations to find such a relationship. Although the two countries are greatly disparate in geographic size, economic strength, and political weight, we have shown the world that close and mutually beneficial relations can be built upon very successfully when it is based on fundamental values of true friendship, mutual trust, understanding, and more importantly, commitment. It is these values that bound us together, and I believe it is these values which will continue to bind us in the future. We are the smaller partner in this relationship, but we believe strongly that both our nations benefit from such a strong relationship. In advancing friendship and cooperation, we also need to take cognizance of the historical linkages. This year, in fact, marks the 55th anniversary of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru's visit to Bhutan in 1958. At that time, Bhutan had no motorable road, and Pandit Nehru made the arduous journey on the back of a yak and by foot. Following Pandit Nehru's visit, His late Majesty the Third King of Bhutan, Jigme Dorji Wangchuk, also visited Bhutan in 1961. I mention this here because both these state-level visits are important milestones in relations between Bhutan and India. The warm personal rapport and understanding between Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and His late Majesty the Third King Jigme Dorji Wangchuk truly laid the foundation of Indo-Bhutan relations and the beginning of an enduring development partnership. Although the world has changed in so many ways, these bonds of true friendship and cooperation resonates as strongly today as it did then. A bond that continues to be nurtured and built upon even today by the leaders of our two countries. It's perhaps at Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru's insistence and friendship that Bhutan opened its doors to the outside world after several centuries of self-imposed isolation and embarked on a program of rapid socio-economic development with generous financial assistance, financial as well as technical assistance from India. It was following the visit of Pandit Nehru that the government of India soon after helped us build our first national highway linking the capital Thimphu with the Indian border town of Jaigam. Now a bustling economic hub and a main gateway into Bhutan. The building of the national highway, in fact, ushered in planned development activities for the first time in Bhutan in the form of 5-year plans. The first two 5-year plans were entirely funded by the government of India at a time when India itself had embarked upon its own development path. And to this day, India continues to remain Bhutan's largest development partner. Notwithstanding the global economic crisis and India's own domestic economic difficulties, the government of India has recently committed rupees 45 billion towards Bhutan's 11th 5-year plan. In today's globalized world, where nations continue to compete for scarce resources and where the level of ODA is shrinking, the principle solidarity between nations is but truly exemplified by this continued assistance. With India's generous assistance to Bhutan's successive 5-year plans, the quality of life of the Bhutanese people have greatly improved. As a nation, these acts of magnanimity will never be lost on us, and we are profoundly grateful to the government and people of India who have been steadfast and key development partner in promoting the socio-economic development of Bhutan. Over the years, relations between the two countries have gradually evolved into a sustainable partnership. Our development cooperation encompasses varied areas such as health, education, infrastructure, culture, urban development, human resource development, media, and telecommunications. However, collaboration in hydropower development is the centerpiece of our economic cooperation and is, in fact, testimony to the fact that Indo-Bhutan relations have grown beyond donor-recipient relation into that of equal partners. With a total capacity of 30,000 megawatts and an economically viable total capacity of 23,760 megawatts, the two countries in 2008 have committed to harness a minimum of 10,000 megawatts of electricity by the year 2020. Bhutan would not have contemplated on this ambitious program to develop its vast hydropower potential without the assurances of support and commitment from India. India is not only Bhutan's main development partner, but also its leading trade partner. A free trade regime exists between India and Bhutan, and the ever-increasing growth in the volume of trade between the two nations clearly show how deeply integrated Bhutan's economy is with that of the Indian economy. While Bhutan strives to achieve economic growth and diversify its trade, India will continue to remain Bhutan's largest and most important trading partner. With India being the destination for over 90% of Bhutanese export and source of import for over 70% of total imports, trade relations between both countries are only growing, and we look forward to enhancing our economic relationship further. Underlying all of this progress is the strong people-to-people ties between our two countries and the strong shared interest and shared values that our people have. Most of our civil servants, many of whom hold important positions in the civil service today, have studied in India. And every year, more and more students continue to pursue their studies in various universities across India. I myself had the privilege of undergoing the Indian Administrative Service course in Missouri in 1991. The regular exchange of high-level visits between the two countries also continue to play a crucial role in strengthening these ties further. Besides the increasing trend of Indian nationals visiting Bhutan as tourists, there are more than 50,000 Indian nationals living and working in Bhutan. Apart from strengthening Bhutan-India relations and placing it on an enduring path, Bhutan, in the past few years, has seen the successful consolidation of the democratic process and the full-scale transformation of its socio-economic landscape. The credit for these achievements belong not only to Bhutan, but equally to the government and people of India, without whose generous support our tasks would have been almost difficult. Today, the world is beginning to see India, the largest parliamentary democracy, assume the global influence to which its economic size and strength, its strategic weight, and its rich history entitle it. Bhutan's future is inextricably linked to India, and we look toward a strong India that's prosperous and stable, being a cornerstone for regional stability and global security. On our part, the Royal Government is determined to deepen the ties that connect our nations and ensure that our people can take full advantage of the immense possibilities of this partnership. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and my dear students, this is my second visit to India within the 4 months that I have been the Minister for Foreign Affairs. My first visit was with our Prime Minister in September this year. The warmth and goodwill that we have been received with each time has left a deep impression on me. We are, in a very real way, part of one family. One family that's mutually dependent on one member, on one another. And that mutual dependence extends to the issues of our common prosperity and security. Our relations with India are strong and continue to grow stronger. India has been our closest and most consistent partner and central to the Royal Government's foreign policy priorities. The wide array of development partnership reflects the breadth and depth of our shared interest. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my dear students, in this epitome of ideal partnership, one can spend a lifetime picking cherries. However, I'd like to conclude by quoting what His Majesty the King Jimmy Kasanam Wangchuk said at the Republic Day celebrations early this year, where His Majesty was the chief guest. And I quote, "Today, as we look ahead, we see a long journey, not without its challenges, but nevertheless, a journey whose road will be paved with geopolitical and historical foundations, born on the spirit of trust, interdependence, and constancy, but above all, a journey defined by India and Bhutan together." Tashidele and Jai Hind.
Thank you. Could you help? Yeah. I thank the Foreign Minister of Bhutan for his most educative and enlightening and, in fact, inspirational speech. And Bhutan has been, I've had the pleasure of visiting that country, and it's been a very good friend. And in a way, as I said, our partnership is exemplary and of mutual benefit to our two countries. I would now like to introduce our next speaker to you, and that's Ambassador Shyam Saran, who is, from the applause I find that, you don't need any introduction, but honestly, as he's chairman of the National Security Advisory Board of India, and he's also the chairman of this respected think tank, the RIS, which you're all familiar with. And it's prior to, assuming these high posts, he was, of course, our ambassador to our immediate, very important neighboring countries, that's Nepal and Myanmar, and also another country which is also our second largest neighbor, that's Indonesia. And in the Indian Ocean, also a neighbor in the Indian Ocean rim, that's Mauritius. And he served as Foreign Secretary at a very critical time and with great distinction. And the Prime Minister wanted him to continue, but he continued in a different capacity as the advisor to the Prime Minister on nuclear issues, special envoy on climate change, both with ministerial rank, and his services and his continuing services were recognized by the President of India, who conferred the Padma Bhushan on Ambassador Saran. So may I request Ambassador Saran to share some thoughts with us on the subject? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and my dear friend Ronin, also for that very generous introduction. Shri Majumdar, Chancellor of the Symbiosis University, my colleague, Ambassador Sudhir Devre, who is the convener of this international conference, members of the faculty of Symbiosis University, dear students, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I would also like to add my words of welcome to His Excellency the Foreign Minister of Bhutan, a country with which we have not only very close political relations, but India-Bhutan partnership is really all that India would like its development partnership to be. So it is a special privilege to share the stage with him this morning. I have been asked to give an overview of India's development partnership. I'm not quite sure how I should do this. Perhaps one has to fall back on what is said about our profession as diplomats, that a diplomat is one who puts his best foot forward when he doesn't have a leg to stand on. So perhaps it is in that spirit which I will approach this subject. My colleague here from the Ministry of External Affairs will be giving you some details of what constitutes India's development partnership program. But I will give you a certain sense of what is the underlying philosophy behind India's development partnership. And having done that, I will try and give you a sense of how over the years, particularly in recent years, this approach to development partnership has undergone some change. As India itself has transformed, undergone a change as our region, as the world has transformed, and how we have adjusted our development partnership as part and parcel of India's diplomacy in terms of its execution. So let me begin with what I should call the continuities in terms of India's development partnership. India is not a new entrant to the field of development partnership. In fact, India's development cooperation programs are as old as India itself is, ever since 1947. Though we were a recipient country as far as ODA is concerned, but at the same time, India was also a very important source of development cooperation. First, to begin with its neighbors, including, of course, Bhutan, but later on extending to the entire family of developing nations. What distinguishes India's development cooperation philosophy from other traditional donors, say from the OECD, is one, we don't look upon development cooperation, we don't look upon India working together with, extending assistance to other sister developing countries as aid. We do not accept that there is a donor-recipient relationship between India and its development partners. And that's a big difference. It's a big difference because it is not we who determine what will be the priorities of development which our partners wish to follow. We adjust to their priorities. We adjust to their requirements. Therefore, it is not a prescriptive relationship as it often is with traditional donors, who look upon assistance as something which is being given as almost like charity, where you have to follow certain rules, certain criteria which are laid down by the source of assistance. That is not India's approach. We look upon our development cooperation with our sister developing countries as being in the nature of an equal partnership. An equal partnership which also recognizes that in this development partnership there is also the promise of mutual benefit. Sometimes you hear these days that countries like India and China give assistance because they have a commercial motive, or they want to benefit from this in some commercial ways. Of course, we do consider that this should lead to benefit, but not only benefit for India, but mutual benefit. The other aspect of Indian development cooperation which is striking is how much this cooperation focuses attention on capacity building. That is, how do you use the modest resources which India is able to deploy in order to create capacity, skills, knowledge, empowerment for citizens of the developing countries who are our partners. And this has been a running theme. So if one thing has not changed over the years, is the fact that our development cooperation programs, if you look at them, very much focused on capacity building, on training, on education. The role that this university itself plays in terms of extending knowledge, extending skills to students who come from many parts of the world. If there is a change, the change is in terms of shifting from merely providing assistance for training to actually building institutions in partner countries for providing skills and knowledge. So there are a number of institutions which are being set up in several African countries who will provide skills not only to citizens of that country, but in fact several African countries, whether it is in the field of textiles or information technology or agriculture. Several institutions are in the process of being set up. Some have been set up, some are in the process of being set up. The other aspect of India's development cooperation is that when we have a project, no administrative load is put on that project. There is no load put in the administration of that project. So, for example, when I was ambassador in Nepal, if we were typically doing, say, a drinking water project, the administration of that project, all the costs involved would be taken care of by the economic development division of the Embassy of India, Kathmandu itself. Or, for example, the services of a consultant. That would also not, the payment for that would not come out from the assistance program that was being carried out. So, in a sense, whatever India is providing is almost pure assistance. Unlike much of what comes from traditional donors, where there is a loading of administrative expenses, of consultants' expenses, of drawing up of a DPR, various other elements, in fact, ensure that what is really left is not very much, is only a fraction of the total cost. So that is very important. Third important element is that Indian assistance programs or development programs never bypass the government of the partner country. Whatever we do in a country, we work through the government of that country. And this again is a contrast, because in many cases you will find that the OSCE donors insist that their assistance should go through their designated NGOs or their designated agencies, completely bypassing the government of the recipient country. We never do that. We always work through the governments of our partner countries. As I said, the purpose of our development cooperation is to create capacity, opportunities for greater investment and trade with that partner country. How has that changed over the years? As I mentioned, one of the changes is that from purely providing training slots in some of our training institutions in India, or providing scholarships to students from African countries or Asian countries, what we have started doing is we are actually setting up institutions in partner countries for providing capacity. So that is one shift that has taken place. The second shift, I would say, is that from essentially programs which were very much bilateral in nature, over the last several years, we have now started working with regional associations, and we have also started working through multilateral, even UN institutions. And this has been because, as the Vice President said this morning, there is a move towards greater regional integration, setting up of regional institutions. And so we have found that it is perhaps worthwhile for us not only to work through bilateral programs, but also to work through these regional programs. So we do a number of programs, for example, with ASEAN, quite apart from some of the bilateral things that we may be doing with individual ASEAN countries. Similarly, with Africa, we do a number of bilateral programs, development programs, but at the same time, we do a number of programs with the African Union as our partner, ECOWAS as our partner, SADC as our partner. So that also has been a certain change in the manner in which we carry out our development projects. Third change is that from a focus in the past on large infrastructure projects or very long gestation period projects, we have also started now working on shorter gestation, smaller scale development projects, which are essentially, in fact, focused on the local communities. They are focused on providing immediate benefit through programs which are typically 6 months to 1 year. And these do not exceed, in some cases, about 3 crores of rupees or 30 million rupees. That is the outer limit for the scope of the project. And these have proved to be very, very successful. Particularly in places like Nepal, we are also doing programs of this kind in Afghanistan, in northern Sri Lanka. So this focus on going straight to the local community, still working together with the government of the country, not excluding them, this has proved to be extremely valuable, also giving you much greater return, bringing about much greater impact with a smaller amount of investment. This is another change that has taken place. And two other changes that I would like to draw attention to. One is, most of our programs in the past used to be done through agencies like public sector companies, ministries of the government of India, excuse me, some private sector companies. Only recently we have now started mobilizing the very large NGO community that we have in India, which have a lot of skills, which have a lot of familiarity with how to work together with local communities. As I mentioned to you, that there has been a shift towards small development projects. In carrying out those small development projects, we have found that our NGOs, particularly those who are well established, like SEWA, for example, they have skills which even the government does not have. So we have now started mobilizing these NGOs, a network of NGOs, to support many of our development programs. That has been an important change. And lastly, even though there is a difference in terms of our approach to development cooperation from traditional donors, OECD countries, or, for example, international financial agencies like the World Bank, or even some of the UN agencies, we have, on a case-by-case basis, started working together with these traditional donors or these international agencies in third countries, where we provide some component of the training, some component of the project, and some of the financing, some other component of the project comes from a traditional donor or from an international financial institution. And the scope of these kind of projects is steadily increasing. So this is another change in terms of bringing a greater degree of flexibility in the way in which India carries out its development programs. In sum, I think India has kept up with a lot of the changes that have taken place, both regionally as well as globally, and has ensured that its development cooperation programs are true to the original philosophy behind these programs, and yet some new elements have been introduced in order to make them more effective. Lastly, I would say if there is a lacuna in our development cooperation projects, it is the weakness in terms of evaluation. That we do not have a very good means of trying to, or method of trying to work out whether or not the impact that it is supposed to have, a program is supposed to have, in fact has had that impact. That is the kind of thing which I think a much closer collaboration between the practitioners, that is the Ministry of External Affairs, its Development Partnership Administration, and institutions like Symbiosis can play a very important role. How to structure evaluation methods which are in keeping with our philosophy of development cooperation, not the kind of evaluation which takes place typically in a OECD assistance project. So I very much look forward to a time when the university, Symbiosis, and the Ministry of External Affairs and other institutions who are involved, who are stakeholders in development cooperation, can really work together in order to make certain that what is really a very shining example of India's relationship with other developing countries, this is something which is put on a much more strengthened plane. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Shyam, for bringing out very clearly and graphically how our development programs, which you don't refer to as development assistance programs or development aid, but as development partnership, how it is a partnership. And you brought it out in very specific terms, and I'm grateful to you for that. And for also what we can do to further improve it, and particularly in terms of evaluation. That's a gap which I hope will be noted, and the suggestion will be taken on board. We have our next speaker to give the perspective of the Ministry of External Affairs in terms of development partnership is Mr. Abhay Thakur. And he's currently Joint Secretary North in the Ministry of External Affairs. And we have worked together in Moscow years back, in '92, I think. And since then, he's been in different places. He's been in London. He's been in Tel Aviv. He's been back to in Moscow also as a counselor and as director of our cultural center there. And of course, he was special assistant to our Minister of External Affairs. And prior to taking up his present assignment, he was Consul General in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. So, Abhay, if you could give us the ministry's perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Less than 48 hours ago, when Additional Secretary DPA in our ministry, Ms. Sujata Mehta, for a very pressing reason could not come, she asked me to come here, and I gladly agreed because it gave me a chance to come to Pune. But I did not know at that time that I would be sharing the dais with such illustrious senior colleagues of mine, particularly Ambassador Ronen Sen, with whom I started my career as a probationer in Moscow. Also, Ambassador Shyam Saran sir, who has already outlined the broad strategy in a very befitting manner of a senior colleague. And it is for the implementing officers like me to make sure that what he has said gets translated and implemented on the ground. I will make my best effort to explain in this university today, particularly keeping in mind the larger audience of the students, I think, towards whom this conference is probably directed, and give out in detail the functioning and the achievements of the Development Partnership Administration of India. Sorry. To begin, India's developmental assistance the vision was outlined by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who held that we in India should share our developmental experiences with other countries traversing the same path as ours. This has been a central tenet of independent India's foreign policy from the beginning. Our International Technical and Economic Cooperation Program, ITEC, which aims at capacity building, was launched in 1964. Under ITEC, just to give you an example, 10,000 persons from 161 countries were trained in 280 different disciplines during the last 1 year alone. This is just to give you an idea of the extent of our ITEC program. 10,000 students from 161 countries in 280 different courses. I would also like to recall here that just a couple of weeks ago we had a meeting of the Parliamentary Consultative Committee on External Affairs, and the Honorable MPs felt unanimously that they did not know that there was so much happening in the development partnership of India. It is just that there was very little appreciation domestically. And they did urge us that this is something which we should make known at a much wider scale across India, and also be open to ideas in terms of its implementation. So this is just one of the figures that I would like to draw your attention to. In terms of the range of developmental assistance, we can categorize it into three broad areas. One, training and capacity building, which Ambassador Saran correctly said has been the traditional model. And then there are two other areas into which we have moved into relatively recently. One is the developmental project on the ground. Bhutan hydropower is a major case in point, but also roads, agriculture, health, construction. So India is actually assisting and involved with several developmental projects of larger scale in its partner countries. The third category of assistance is through grants and lines of credit. We currently have extended 150 lines of credit of over $10 billion, of which 60% is to Africa, through both Indian and foreign public and private partners. Once again, coming back to the first category of training and capacity building, we have nearly 10,000 trainees trained last year in disciplines ranging from finance, management, IT, telecom, rural development, agro-processing, election management, WTO studies, parliamentary practices, and mass communications. We also have deputation of experts abroad in areas like IT, auditing, legal affairs, agriculture, pharmacology, and public administration. For example, we deputed a police advisor to Belize and a public administration expert to Namibia. Another relatively newer direction in the training and capacity building direction is GOI setting up training institutes abroad. So not only training foreign personnel in India, but also setting up training centers abroad, which include, and this is one example, an IT institute being set up in Myanmar, an agriculture institution in Afghanistan, vocational training centers in Sri Lanka, and we are committed to establishing institutions at the Pan-African and regional level in IT, civil aviation, agriculture, and earth sciences. Coming to lines of credit. Lines of credit are extended to developing countries on concessional terms to undertake projects for infrastructure development and capacity building, and to import goods and services from India. I've already said 150 LOCs worth $10 billion have been made available. They cover an extraordinary range of projects, numbering about 500, from drinking water schemes, solar electrification, transmission lines, cement plants, and railway infrastructure. Incidentally, the Dungsum cement plant in Bhutan has started pilot production, and it should be fully commissioned very soon. The third category of our developmental assistance is what we can call project-tied assistance, under which major projects are under implementation in Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Maldives, Myanmar, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. These cover some of the areas which I have mentioned. One of the important objectives behind these areas and behind this project-tied assistance is to improve our cross-border connectivity with our neighbors. And Ambassador Shyam Saran's idea when he was in Kathmandu is under implementation of Tarai roads, which will link the Nepali Tarai region much more closely to India, and integrated checkposts, which basically provide for joint customs checkpoints and related infrastructure for speedier movement of goods and services. We are undertaking, as project-tied assistance, archaeological conservation, IT, and SMEs sector in Southeast Asia, Central Asia, Africa, and Latin America. I will outline some of the highlights of our important assistance projects in our neighborhood. In Bhutan, we have extended assistance to successive 5-year plans of Bhutan since 1961. And most recently, in August this year, we committed to providing rupees 5,000 crores assistance to the 11th 5-year plan of Bhutan from 2013 to 2018. As Ambassador Shyam correctly said, priority areas are identified by the Royal Government of Bhutan and include infrastructure, health, and education. Small developmental projects in Bhutan in the last 5-year plan period numbered over 1,800. We now have 3 hydropower projects producing over 1,400 megawatt in Bhutan, which are already supplying to India. 3 more, totaling nearly 3,000 megawatt, are under construction and should be completed around 2017. And 4 others of about 2120 megawatt are under techno-economic consideration. One point I would like to make here on the HEP sector with Bhutan, that this is truly a win-win partnership, that we are able to ensure India's energy security and at the same time provide much needed foreign exchange earnings to Bhutan through sale of electricity to India. So it helps Bhutanese economy and it helps our power sector. Coming to Bangladesh, we have worked closely to build a new paradigm of bilateral relations in recent years. A number of new and pragmatic initiatives have been taken that have helped strengthen bilateral relations, including in the areas of security, border management, connectivity, power transmission, shipping, and culture. With Nepal, despite the ongoing political transition, we have implemented more than 450 small development projects all across Nepal. And the work on Terai roads, railway links, and ICPs is continuing. With Myanmar, the basic objective of our projects is to ensure security, peace, and tranquility across the border. Connectivity to Myanmar is very important for development of our northeastern states. Our assistance is directed at enhancing connectivity not only to Myanmar but to the ASEAN region beyond. Our focus is to deepen and broaden our engagement by taking into account new and emerging realities in Myanmar. In Afghanistan, India has played an important role in reconstruction and rehabilitation. Cumulative GOI assistance is over $2 billion. This includes large infrastructure projects like the Salma Dam, electricity transmission lines, and the construction of the Afghan parliament, capacity building, and as well as humanitarian assistance like supply of high energy biscuits. Sri Lanka is is an issue that is seen very frequently in the media, which is why I would like to give details of what India is doing in terms of its developmental assistance in northern and eastern Sri Lanka. For the resettlement of internally displaced persons, we are doing a major housing project to provide 50,000 houses. The pilot project for 1,000 housing units in 5 districts was completed last year, and currently 10,000 houses are being funded by us in an owner-driven model, which is where we fund the owner and he builds the house himself. We also have an agency-driven model where we have 6,000 housing units are being constructed by us. So once again, the option is made available. We can go for an owner-driven model or for an agency-driven model. We have also provided in a post-conflict time in Sri Lanka short-term shelters, agriculture toolkits, tractors, boats, and fishing equipment to promote regeneration of livelihoods. Coming to Africa, we have a consultative model of cooperation responsive to the needs of African countries. The India-Africa Forum Summits of 2008 and 2011 gave impetus to this approach. In 2011, we announced LOCs of $5 billion, a specific LOC of 330 million for the new Ethio-Djibouti railway line, and more than 22,000 scholarships over the next 3 years, as well as establishment of more than 80 capacity building institutions. The projects under implementation include rural technology parks in Zimbabwe, Malawi, South Sudan, Ivory Coast, and Republic of Congo. Grant assistance to the education, IT, and health sectors of Malawi, Botswana, Namibia, Seychelles, and Tanzania. Training programs for African personnel include on decentralization and local governance, watershed management, and micro enterprises. So what is special or different about India's developmental assistance to partner countries? Our assistance is need-based. Our assistance is demand-driven. Priority areas are identified by the beneficiary. There is no export of ideology. There is no export of a certain model of development. It focuses genuinely on capacity building. There are no strings attached. There are no hidden agendas. It is non-intrusive and non-prescriptive. The aim is real partnership. The basic objectives being ensuring security, peace, and tranquility across our borders, and to deepen engagement with our neighbors, including by strengthening cross-border connectivity in South Asia, mutually beneficial exchange of developmental experiences and resources, assistance within the parameters of our foreign policy priorities, aimed at strengthening traditionally friendly relations through win-win partnerships. Now that our developmental partnership assistance program has grown significantly over the last several years, there has been a felt need to establish a separate division, a separate administration to handle this, the implementation of developmental programs abroad. The underlying motivation was the significant expansion of our assistance and the clear need to set up an institutional framework to focus on the effectiveness and delivery mechanism of our assistance vis-a-vis its stated objectives. The establishment of the DPA also helped the Ministry of External Affairs bring the entire range of external developmental assistance under one umbrella of the DPA. The principal responsibilities of the Development Partnership Administration are speedy and efficient implementation of our external programs, developing standard operating procedures to effectively handle India's assistance. In terms of functioning, it is our effort in the DPA, it is still evolving, but we do have several consultants and officers outside the IFS who are manning the DPA. It is functioning as a multidisciplinary division of MEA and drawing upon services of professional consultants pooled in the same building, in the same office space. And this helps us bring diverse expertise and speed up implementation of projects abroad. It also helps us applying best practices in different projects. And once again, we are nowhere near perfect. We are open to ideas, open to more partnerships within India. And I think as we expand our program, our developmental assistance, we will need much wider support base in India from institutions like the Symbiosis International University. So with these words, I thank the audience for their kind attention. Thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity. And our best wishes on behalf of the MEA for the Symbiosis International University. Thank you.
I thank the speakers for, I think we've had excellent presentations, and Abhay, I thank you for giving us this overall perspective. Briefly, I just want to sum up in the 2-3 minutes we have got. One, I had referred to right in the beginning what Dr. Majumdar has said, but and I also referred to Mahatma Gandhi. I referred to South Africa, the debt we owe South Africa. But going back to development partnership, I didn't refer to one aspect, and that is, the great man who's left a void in our midst. That's Nelson Mandela. It was a great day. I remember in Namibia. I was present on that day. Fortunate, where we had, in a sense, it was the end of an era, beginning of a new era. It was because when we launched the Africa Fund that was in Zimbabwe in 1986, that was to assist and cooperate, develop partnership with what was then known as the frontline states. And a lot of that, what we had imagined at that time, was also what we are talking of today. It's interesting. It was telecommunications, it was rail links, it was establishment of ports between the different frontline states, between Mozambique, Zambia, Zimbabwe, etc. And also specific capacity building in specific areas of what would happen after colonialism. And that was, in a sense, the last bastion of colonialism, which ended when we entered a new era. And also, the electrifying presence of Madiba on that day. It was a magic that day. I would also like to say that, finally, that on education, just one point is that it is, perhaps because of our success, perhaps because of what we have been doing, the number of students actually in India, foreign students, specifically from Africa, compared to what, when I was last in Delhi in the Prime Minister's office, it has gone to less than half the total number. And perhaps because of distance education, open university, now we have this year a virtual university, India-Africa University being set up. But this needs to be looked at as to why the numbers are going up, down, in terms of physical number of students. And particularly, and overall numbers being half, and from Africa, it's 1/5. Why? So we need to ask ourselves this question. And I think some specific suggestions have been made, and the Vice President made it very clear. I think he set the tone for this debate as we should do some introspection. I think we have done a lot, but we need to do more. And he put it actually quite frankly. He defined it as immobility. We have to really set our minds free. Look at approaches. Maybe we'll get some feedback not only from people from the university authorities, but from feedback from students about their experiences, very frank two-way exchanges. That would be helpful. And also, for instance, on Bhutan, we need to do more in terms of it's a win-win partnership, as Abhay pointed out, but perhaps, and it's my personal feeling, but I think we can bear it out, I think the tariffs we have frozen for far too long. We should look at that power tariffs to improve it and make it more oriented to the market, and this will help us also. It will help us in India, it will help countries, but that general, we should keep that in mind for the future. Finally, I would just like to say that, for me, I don't remember it. I've been around for quite some time, but I don't remember attending a conference or even hearing about a conference which is as ambitious in its IR conference of this nature held by any university so far. So this is the first in many ways. Congratulations, Dr. Majumdar, Dr. Vidya, Dr. Gupte. Wonderful example. And also I hope that, and I'm glad that this has been done in cooperation with the Ministry of External Affairs, I hope this will be the first of its type, and I'm glad that it's outside Delhi. Not just because it's my hometown, Pune, in a sense of my birthplace, but it should be here. It's been a rich, you have more foreign students here than any other, than Delhi or any other city in India. But this should be the first of its type. There should be more. And the support from the External Affairs Ministry, I think we can work together, learning from this experience, and to make this into not only from event to event, but to make this part of a regular interaction on a continuing basis. So thank you very much for your attention, and once again, on your behalf, my warm thanks to our distinguished panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for conducting the session. May I now request Ambassador Ronen Sen to kindly felicitate the dignitaries on the dais. Thank you, sir. I would request Ambassador Deori to kindly felicitate Ambassador Ronen Sen. Thank you, sir. We now break for lunch. We request all the delegates to be here by 2:15 sharp so that we can